Hello friends! So what's with everyone hating on this movie because it's basically the same as the 2008 film, The Strangers? I knew this movie was a remake long before it was released. There have been articles, we talked about it in the annual recap episode back in January too. And in my opinion, and from the comments I've seen online, the trailer also makes it clear. Speaking of the annual recap episode, a deep cut, I know, but you guys remember my list of most anticipated films of the year? Well, welcome to a 3-movie block of movies that made my list of most anticipated movies of the year, but ended up disappointing me. Hey there, movie lovers. Welcome back. It's your movie buddy here, ready to dive into the next movie on the shortening list of movies that I need to catch up on. Whether you're a longtime subscriber, follower, or a new face, I am thrilled to have you here. If you're looking for detailed plot breakdowns, you won't find them here. But stick around for my spoiler-free thoughts and honest opinions, usually on the latest releases, but right now I'm just trying to get back on track. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find timestamps in this episode's description to jump straight to the sections that you're most interested in. New reviews drop every Friday, so hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow on Spotify to stay updated. Got a movie in mind that you want me to talk about? Drop a comment on YouTube, send me a DM on Instagram, or let me know on the podcast. And yeah, my Instagram, I'll update it eventually. Any articles that I mentioned in today's episode will be linked in the description below, so grab your popcorn, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button, lock your doors, lock your windows, and let's get into today's episode on The Strangers Chapter 1. After their car breaks down in an eerie small town, Maya and Ryan, a young couple celebrating their anniversary, are forced to spend the night in a remote cabin. Panic ensues as they're terrorized by 3 masked strangers who strike with no mercy and seemingly no motive. Today's episode is going to be a little different. I try to talk mostly on what I enjoy about the movie. I have to say up front for this movie, there isn't much, so bear with me. Normally we stick to a specific structure, but I had a tough time with The Strangers Chapter 1. So we're going to breeze through some usual topics and dive deeper into others. First up, let's talk about the theme or message. I have to admit, I had to do some Googling for this one, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really get much, so we're just gonna gloss over this section. The movie hints at themes of hopelessness and nihilism. According to masterclass.com, nihilism is a continental philosophy, a philosophical idea that originated in Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries that posits that everything is meaningless. While there are multiple positions and variations of nihilism, they all work around this premise of pervasive pointlessness and no purpose to life. Gently tickling the topic, the fact that the strangers seemingly have no motive is chilling and horrific. And to be honest, it's something that this movie fumbled. Now hear me out. I'm gonna talk about it more later in the episode because this really bothered me. Maybe the real message here is a simple warning. Don't stay at a remote cabin in the woods and never answer the door. Alright, we're just gonna gently brush past the character development and we're just gonna move on to the cinematography and visuals of the film. This movie has some moments that really stood out to me, but overall, it felt uninspired. I know it sounds harsh, so I really do want to focus on the positives. I really loved the overhead shots and the wide angle shots, especially of the forest. Now, it's very clear watching the movie that they're in the middle of nowhere. We see the GPS and the characters mention it several times. These shots of the sprawling forest emphasize the fact that they truly are in the middle of nowhere. I don't know about you, but nature therapy is so real. So the idea of being alone in nature and not having to deal with the day-to-day rush is a dream. But that quickly turns into a very isolating and dangerous experience. I also really love a POV shot. According to Wikipedia, a point of view shot is a film scene, usually a short one, that is shot as if through the eyes of a character. I think it's so interesting throughout the film to see the point of view of the strangers, seeing how clearly they can see Maya and Ryan while the two remain oblivious. These shots really add to that suspense and that eerie atmosphere. Moving on from the visuals, let's talk about the acting. Madeline Petch, Riverdale Queen, at least until I stopped watching Riverdale. I also saw her in 2020's Sightless, but I haven't seen any of her work outside of those 2 projects. Madeline as Maya is great. I think she did a really good job. She really conveys the openness of the character, the romance, and she stands out during the intense moments when Maya is scared and screaming. On the other hand, Froy Gutierrez as Ryan. I don't know if I didn't like his acting or I didn't like the character, maybe the way Ryan's written. Speaking of writing, I'm sure he acted well with the writing he was given, in which case the performance is almost there, but honestly, the writing made Ryan look bad, which in turn made Froy's portrayal come across poorly. There's a lot working or not working here because I felt like the chemistry between the two leads was non-existent. I do not believe in their 5-year-long relationship, no matter how hard Madeline tried to sell it. I wasn't buying it, and I rewatched the movie twice at home. I am not sold on the relationship, the development, or the resolution. All of this made me feel really detached from the characters. We touched on the writing briefly, but I do want to add that I really had a major issue that I will discuss later in the episode. What I will say is that the characters make so many poor decisions that it takes you out of the movie. These decisions make them seem unrealistic, and I think it's that grounded realism that's essential to making this concept truly terrifying. Now, onto the section that I don't get to add very often, comparison to previous films. I have not seen The Strangers Prey at Night, but all we really need to focus on is 2008's The Strangers. Earlier this week, I rewatched the original movie because it has been a really long time since I've seen it, and oh my gosh, the original 2008 film The Strangers is in a league of its own. It's an icon and a classic for a reason. Chapter 1 just doesn't measure up. Like I said, it'd been a long time since I'd seen The Strangers, and I was really surprised at how intimate the movie is. It feels more personal. There are so many close-ups, and the chemistry between Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman seems more raw and real. Their romance is believable, making the development and resolution more palpable and impactful. The camera work in the original isn't super steady, which also makes the film feel more immersive. The Strangers is more stripped back in a way that enhances the terror. The home invasion is scarier, not as gimmicky or in your face. The Strangers also just tells a better story. I know you're thinking it's the same story, and it definitely is, but it isn't. I will explain, but The Strangers excels in that buildup and the tension so that the discomfort and anxiety is inherently scarier and almost disturbing. It feels real, and I want to emphasize how hard it is to wrap your head around the randomness of the violence in the movie. Now, let's wrap up with my final thoughts on the movie. After going over some elements, the real question remains, is it worth your time? If you cannot tell already, definitely not. Okay, yes and no, hear me out and get comfortable because we'll be here for a bit. So you remember that major issue I said that I have with the writing of this movie and that I'd talk about it later in the episode? Later is now, and I don't do this often, but consider this your spoiler warning for The Strangers Chapter 1 because I had a hard time explaining myself without spoilers. And to be honest, I think you can pick this up from the trailers, but I still want to add a spoiler warning just in case. So if you do not want spoilers, please skip ahead. I'll leave a timestamp in the description so that you can skip the spoilers and pick back up when we're done. But if you're staying locked in with me, let's get into it. According to 25yearslatersite.com, while none of this is confirmation, but when you put it all together, it makes a very convincing case that the killers in this movie are just xenophobic psychos who don't like people driving through their town. Xenophobia is defined as a fear or dislike of anything which is perceived as being foreign or strange. Xenophobia is much more complex than that, but I found that this definition worked best with the way it was used in the article. In the comparison section, I said that the story is definitely the same, and it is, but the 2008 story is better because the motivation for the Strangers is completely different. It's more bleak and not so seemingly straightforward, and that's what's scary. The arguably small change in that iconic and chilling line, "because you were home," to "because you're here," really emphasizes the massive perceived change in motivation that cheapens the story and dilutes that concept of bleak hopelessness. I think the first 10 minutes or so of Chapter 1 really sets this up, and honestly, I think it should have been left out. Now, I am saying this having obviously only seen chapter 1, so maybe the next 2 movies will expand on what I'm assuming will be the necessary inclusion of the town and answer so many questions. Of course, every movie has its pros and cons, and naturally, people's preferences vary. I've been sharing my thoughts, and I'm sure you know where I stand by now, but I'm still going to talk about some criticism of the movie and share my thoughts. Then we'll get into that yes part of the yes and no. A lot of people gave this movie a low rating because it's the same as the original. We touched on this at the top of the video. I knew it was going to be the same thing. A lot of people knew it was going to be the same thing. So I'm not sure if the marketing wasn't clear or if people just didn't see enough trailers or just didn't see any trailers. The person went on to say that the movie was marketed as the making of the killers. And I do think this is marketing for the trilogy, maybe. I can see how it's misleading though to attach to chapter 1 since we don't get any real backstory or any obvious backstory, having only seen a third of the franchise for the strangers, or any addition to what very little backstory the 2008 film gave. Another review stressed the lack of suspense that the original mastered. They said that chapter 1 relies heavily on predictable jump scares and loud noises. The atmosphere that should add to the tension and dread comes off as bland and uninspired. There is no buildup and no subtlety. Now, this is a comment that I can get behind. Plus, many of the scares, ones that I think could have been really unsettling and a fun scare in the theater, predictable? Yes, but it still would have given you the heebie-jeebies. Well, they were all in the trailer for some reason. So not only do we know exactly when several scares and creepy moments are coming, like the shower scene, but most of these moments are so in your face and just loud. This really is the meat of what I was able to find. A lot of people rated the movie low just because it's a remake. I would rate it low because it's a bad movie. That's not to say there isn't something here for someone. I'm of the mind that all movies have their audience, and this can be a great movie for the right person. Someone did say they preferred this movie over the original because it was scarier. I absolutely disagree, but I totally respect that opinion. This movie does build tension. There are some really good silent scares that just creep you out, and the score stands out on more than one occasion. I think if you're getting into horror, maybe you want to start working your way out of the PG-13 horror flicks, then this is a good one to add to your list. Now, it's time to talk about the scaries. If you're curious if this movie is scary or not, I would say if you're prone to loud jump scares, then yeah, this movie made me jump, but it wasn't unsettling and terrifying like the original, in my opinion. Like I said, I did see some reviews that said chapter 1 was scarier and had more unsettling atmosphere, so it really depends on what you find scary. I would say no, but the movie does have some genuinely skin-crawling moments, but they are few and far in between, and again, plenty of loud jump scares. There is also some gore, and a dead chicken is shown on screen. Have you had the chance to watch The Strangers Chapter 1 yet? If not, what's holding you back? Is it not your cup of tea, not your usual genre? Are you waiting for the next 2 movies to release so that you can just watch them all together? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts after today's episode. And if you watched the movie already, I want to know your take. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or did you fall somewhere in between? Share your thoughts, opinions, and reactions in the comments below. I am all ears. You know, I've been calling this movie a requel in my head, and a requel is defined as a movie that revisits the subject matter of an earlier film, but is not a remake or a linear continuation of its plot. I did do some more Googling, and according to Screen Rant, The Strangers trilogy is not a remake or a reboot, but a relaunch of the franchise. Chapter 1 explores the same concept as the original film, with future sequels set to reveal the origins of the 3 masked killers. Despite similarities to the 2008 film, the new trilogy plans to take the franchise in new directions. We can expect the final 2 installments pretty soon. I read online that principal photography took place over 52 days from September 2022 to November 2022. Now, principal photography is when they actually have the cast and crew on set shooting the footage. So chapters 2 and 3 have already been filmed. And I read that chapter 2 is expected to release in late 2024, and there is no release date yet for chapter 3. Even though I was clearly disappointed by chapter 1, I am open-minded and I hope my opinion will change about this relaunch. We'll see though, so make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss my thoughts and opinions on chapter 2 and 3 when they release. As a fan of the original, and like so many others who hold it in high regard, it was really hard for me not to compare the two films. At the end of the day, chapter 1 is just not as good as the 2008 film, in my opinion. It feels like a generic horror movie that awkwardly borrows elements from the original. For instance, the two church boys were probably supposed to come off as creepy, but they ended up just being weird and they felt out of place. The pacing of the movie was off. I felt like everything happened too quickly and then it was over. On top of that, I didn't like the credit scene. I think the scene was a bit much. I could have dealt with it, yes, to be honest, but then they doubled down. I just wasn't a fan. If you love the original, then there's a good chance you'll be disappointed. The Strangers Chapter 1 will probably make you jump. It's scary in the moment, but The Strangers gets under your skin and will have you thinking about it for years. Now, before we wrap up, I want to talk about the movies I'll be sharing my thoughts on next. I'm still chipping at the movie block that I got stuck behind, but we've got Furiosa up next, then Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. If you've been keeping up with me each week, then you already know I'm gonna keep reminding you guys that I put in all the work for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I watched all 9 movies. Did I need to? No. Actually, yes, it altered my DNA and I am a different person now. What I'm trying to say is I'm really looking forward to that episode. After that, Bad Boys Ride or Die, and once I'm all caught up, I've got a list of podcast exclusive episodes that I'm gonna start working on. As for upcoming theater releases, we're watching A Quiet Place Day 1, and I got tickets for Maxine, so you know I'll finally be watching X and Pearl. I'm waiting on tickets to release for Longlegs, Cuckoo, and Trap, and more, but for now, the only other movie that I do have tickets secured for is Deadpool and Wolverine, and I am beyond excited for that movie. If there's a movie you're excited about and you want me to check out, let me know in the comments below. Send me a message on Instagram at a.rocket.review. Your suggestions are always welcome and I love hearing from you guys. But for now, a huge thank you to everyone who has stuck around with me to the end of the video. Last week, I shared my thoughts on The Fall Guy. If you haven't checked that episode out yet, it's just a click away. If you're watching today's episode on YouTube, you can find a link to that episode in the top right corner of the video. And for my podcast listeners, that episode is available for you as well. Your feedback is always appreciated, so please share your thoughts on YouTube in the comments below. And if you're listening on the Spotify app, swipe up and let me know what you're thinking. Did you agree with my take? Do you have a different opinion? Do you think The Strangers Chapter 1 was as good or better than the original 2008 film? Let's get the conversation going. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. For those who prefer on-the-go listening, follow me on Spotify so you don't miss out on our podcast exclusive episodes. And hey, if you're on Instagram, follow me at a.rocket.review for sneak peeks and behind-the-scenes content. And honestly, behind the scenes is really just me going to the movie theater and watching movies at home. Feel free to hop into my DMs with movie suggestions or just to chat about films. Your support honestly means so much to me, and your engagement helps our community grow. Whether it's on YouTube, the podcast, or on Instagram, your presence is greatly appreciated. So until next time, spread positivity, be safe, take care of yourself, lock your doors, lock your windows, and happy movie watching. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.